The ultimate contrast is the non-existence of this, of what we're experiencing. Beginning by taking a few comfortable deep breaths. Just feeling the body.
When I hear the word emptiness within this context, this is exactly what my image is. Bounciness, springiness.
Can deconstruct panic attacks. If you think that you cannot, then you just don't have experience deconstructing panic attacks. It's 100% possible. Hello, Deep Mindfulness Collective. Very delighted to be here with you. So there's an experience that I think is very closely related to emptiness, which is what in the past, I've used this word for something else now. So I'm sort of, anyway, this phrase is not this. And I mean this in a different case. This is global. This is existential, not this. The mind knows things by contrast, right? So my hand is moving, right? It's really obvious. But if it was all moving hands, like you wouldn't see this one very clearly, right? So it's because of the contrast that you can see this clearly, right? If my hand was just one color and the whole rest of the screen was the same color, there'd be no contrast. You wouldn't see it. The mind experiences things through contrast. The ultimate contrast is the non-existence of this, of what we're experiencing. This exists. It has this quality of being here right now. This experience feels like it is here. That, as weird as it sounds, that has embedded within it, by its nature, of it not being here. A knowledge and awareness that this is appearing, so it wasn't here a second ago, it will not be here in a moment. And the mind knows that from experience. This will be gone. It is gone. It's like going away all the time. So we're going to be looking into the void, which we're going to call not this. And it's literally like, okay, there's this, right? What about not that? What about something else that is not this? And so there's just this other thing. So it sounds a little theoretical or heady or whatever, but it's pretty straightforward actually. If you're new to meditation, this is going to be very weird, but I have faith in you and your strength, and that you're not going to go crazy and run down the street with your clothes off. And it's going to be fun. Commit now. How long do you want to stay for the meditation? And forever hold your pizza. Let's give ourselves an advantage here by meditating for 25 minutes. So find a nice comfortable position you can maintain for the duration of the sit. I'm going to encourage no movement. If you have to move, do so slowly, mindfully. The one caveat is if you're feeling overwhelmed, you always want to listen to overwhelm, even if it's not too strong. You don't want to wait till it's big. Make an adjustment. Go ahead, make a stretch. And when you're ready, we'll begin. Here we go. Beginning by taking a few comfortable deep breaths. Just feeling the body rise and fall. Each time we begin a meditation, we begin with the momentum of all the previous moments. So if the mind was unconscious or floating around, drifting half in, half out a moment ago, it's more likely to be so in this moment. So when we say really arrive, part of what we're saying is recognize that this is exactly what's happening. This experience is occurring. Don't let the mind produce some representation of this moment. And if it does, simply recognizing that representation is exactly what it is. It's just a picture. And noticing this as you relax the head and neck, and the shoulders and arms, and relaxing the hands. Letting go of any attempt to control the breath, just letting the body breathe as it will. As you relax the torso, relax the hips, the upper legs, the knees and calves, and relaxing the feet. And then relaxing all of the body together. As though the body were one continuous muscle, just letting all of it go. Allowing awareness to take in all of our experience. So not trying to reach out and grab every little bit of sense data that's occurring, but allowing the mind to function a little like a lantern, just shining in all directions. Allowing whatever is present to be known by the mind. It is this. That's the experience. It's this. And each time we label our experience, remember that that word is defined by precisely this set of sensations at precisely this moment. It's a new combination every time, so don't use the word lightly when you label this. Truly being with precisely this. Whatever constellation of sense data is present, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Seeing, hearing, feeling, attention, or awareness. In any given moment, we're labeling it as this. There's a kind of fullness to the experience. It's everything that happens to be easily entering awareness at this moment. Labeling our overall experience as this. Soaking in to this unique constellation. Letting go as though time was just restarting again. And asking our senses, asking our awareness, what am I experiencing? Finding our way back to the answer, yes, it is precisely this. And as we explore this, we may find that we have access to a sense of all of this being gone, disappearing. All of this presentness collapsing. The end of this. If that void, that inky black nothing arises, we simply can label or experience it without a label. But if we choose to label, we'll call it not this. So either one is fine, either a sense of this or a sense of not this. This isn't something to think about if we find that the mind is trying to figure this out. What could that possibly mean? Where is it? Searching, thinking. That's just more mind activity. If that's the case, maybe we just stick with precisely this. And sometimes simply looking at this and labeling it as not this is enough for the mind to open to something else, something intangible, something that cannot be understood because it's pre-linguistic. In which case, labeling this emptiness as not this. To be open to the void is to a tiny degree allow ourselves to die. And all of the drives within us that crave to exist. Need to be willing to let go, if only for an instant. If we can partially let go but can't fully let go, we can ask, let go into what? Often, the last burr that's hanging on is the doing self or the observer. Remembering that the observer is an example of part of this. So, even allowing the observer to be eaten up, emptied out, erased. Not this. course, if this is not something we're used to experiencing, it can seem very remote, confusing, or even if we are, perhaps it's just not so familiar. But know that this is not hard. This is an ordinary part of experiencing. The void isn't somewhere else. It's all throughout. Our awareness knows the experience innately. So making a slight transition, rather than looking at both this and not this, just labeling not this. What is the experience of whatever is occurring right now not being here anymore? And the mind and awareness will just know. When we sleep deeply at night, we stop existing, at least from our first person perspective. And we frequently know the experience of reappearing as we begin to wake up. Ah, yes, I remember having a body. I remember a sense of a narrative of my life, things I need to do. All that is what we've been describing as this. But what about the void? Those times when we just don't exist. Not imagining, not trying to conjure. We know, we already know. part, we're simply giving permission for all or part of our experience to not need to exist anymore. All that work, efforting to exist, we can finally rest. Staying with the practice, staying in stillness, recognizing that at first the mind sees these experiences as contrasting, this and not this. But they are deeply embedded. So as you allow a tiny bit of light to enter the eyes, eventually allowing the eyes to rest on a single point, notice that the part of experience that is existing is blended, shot through with a deep absence, a deep emptiness, a void. And that way, letting this particular moment be the great teacher. It shows us how we might bring this practice into every aspect of our life. Okay. So in this case, what we just did was we looked at our sense of, our totality of experiencing, which we're calling this. It has a thisness, a presentness. There's a sense that this is here. It's a phenomenological sort of trick that there's a presentness quality of all these things. They feel like they are here. It's such a powerful message that even questioning that is hard for the mind to do. Hence the sort of challenge in translating this, as we've talked about. Look at your experience and think, what if this is an illusion? What if this actually isn't here? Don't worry about the implications like, oh my God, like what will I do? Like I'm in the Matrix, but like experientially, what if this isn't here? Experientially, it sort of has this like, well, yeah, this part of my mind is saying, yes, this is real. And then to see that it's not real. Now, this sounds woo-woo, mystical, schmystical, like I'm like, oh, reality is not here, etc. We're talking about first-person perspective, perceptual material. So I'm not denying that there is material, physical, data in the world. There is matter. Matter exists. The world, as we experience it, is it's a construct of the mind. So I don't want to say, I've known people who've been like, no, this is all a projection of my mind, which I think is like very solipsistic and very like, I was always like rude when people, I knew one person's like, no, you don't exist. You're a figment of my imagination. I'm like, cool. It seems very rude, but I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that what we think is the world is a projection of the mind. The mind is producing a sense of world and the narratives and all these things. And it's just not that. That is an illusion, and it's helpful. It's a helpful illusion. It helps us get, food on the table, and it helps us, live our lives. And especially the main thing it does is help us pass genetic material forward onto another generation. That is the function of that part of the mind. So hopefully that helps clarify what we just did. We explored this and not this. Different religions and different traditions will describe it very differently because we're talking about something pre-linguistic. As we sort of get into like weirder and weirder territory, it all is, it becomes, people say like, oh, these spiritual experiences are ineffable, like meaning you can't describe it. But part of the reason it's ineffable is we're actually using the reflective part of the brain that can look back at things, that can observe things from sort of an outside, larger point of view. We're using those to like look at experiences that are, it's the emotional brain, or it's the, just to look at the entire functioning of the experience, which breaks down the linguistic process. You're going pre-linguistic, so it's very hard to describe. So I wouldn't say there's a dictionary definition. I think Shinzen has a good essay on the void, but I don't know if it's describing what I'm describing. Let me look real quick. Here we go. Oh, good. It's a short video. Let's watch this video together. It's called The Spirit of the Void. Very cool title, Shinzen. I have a feeling he might not have been the one who titled it, but we'll see. Okay.
So what prompted me to bring up that koan was this little fellow here, okay? Because I can't think of a better iconic representation of enlightenment than this.
Okay, I just want to let people know, you might not be able to see it. It might be too small. That is not a weird sex toy. That is a little Buddha on a spring. I know it seems like sort of obvious, but just wanted to clarify.
Okay, there we go. I would say that we all ride on a kind of effortless, just happeningness that is the nature of consciousness.
I'm going to pause here for a second. So I just want to do a little commentary, is that the presentness of the way that reality feels very present, it's flowing, it's moving, it has this sort of like whole momentum to it. I think once you start to experience this, and again, I apologize if it's hard to locate, but again, the what if this isn't real, I think question is very good for the mind to actually see through that to some degree. It almost feels like it's riding on this big empty, it's like sure, there's a thisness, but there's this huge, deep, infinite not thisness, this emptiness that is surrounding it or everywhere around, everywhere. It's the sort of ground that it's on. And then over time you realize, oh, they're just totally mixed. Like the presentness of this is shot through with that emptiness.
So when I say the word emptiness within, say, the Buddhist context, what image comes to your mind? Well, maybe an image of vastness. I would say that's not incorrect, but it's exactly half the picture. I think for a lot of people, when they hear Buddhists talk about emptiness, the image that comes to their mind is some sort of bleakness. It's like you bust your buns for 40 years on the cushion, and what do you have to show for it? Emptiness.
There's a teacher named Vince Horn, and he talks about how he was very disappointed when he experienced classical awakening because he thought some part of him thought he was going to get something, but you literally get nothing. Like you really get a very deep experience of nothing, and that nothing is deeply liberating. But it's also a kind of, it's like a level of freedom that is very hard to describe. Again, we're getting into pre-linguistic territory, so forgive me if it sounds like, what the hell are you talking about?
Maybe that's another Rabbi and Roshi joke. The Roshi says we attain emptiness, and the Rabbi says that's garnish. Okay, you have to know Yiddish. Garnish means bubkas. It means who wants that? It's nothing. Okay.
I just want to, the play on words there is that it's a word that also means nothing, but it means nothing in a pejorative. So it's the Buddha says, oh, you get emptiness, and the rabbi says, well, that's basically like, well, that's bullshit. Like that's nothing, and it means nothing. So just that's the joke.
When I first encountered the word emptiness, it was just this weird idea that I didn't have any image of. It's like, what the heck? As I say, a lot of people probably think of bleakness. Some people think of vastness. But the reason I so like this little tchotchke is for many, many years, when I use the word emptiness and when I hear the word emptiness within the Buddhist context, this is exactly what my image is. Bounciness, springiness. Robert Boyle wrote something that was subtitled, and I just love the title of this, Touching the Spring of the Air. That's how they, back in those days, talked about pressure. It's like, it's like the springiness of the air, touching the spring of the air. And that is what the experience of emptiness is for me as a meditative experience. It's directly touching the spring of the void.
So this is such a good metaphor. I haven't heard this before actually from Shinzen. But right now, this is a great way because you could look at these as separate and then eventually see them as together, or you could look at them as separate and together simultaneously. Separate and together is what we did today. Look, there's the fullness, the presentness of reality, and then look at the voidness of it. But what Shinzen is talking about is both simultaneously, which is another great venue to get there. It can feel a little more complicated, but if you right now tune into like air, they talk when in chemistry, they talk about the springiness of the air, like you put air under pressure and it has its own like quality. Try to take in like the air pressure that is sort of here. There is a pressure that's occurring. And of course, this is like a trick of the mind. You can't perceive that directly, but the mind can sort of like hold itself in this open way and to recognize that as actually forces that are pushing and pulling. That's why it holds in this way. It's like two forces. It's not just one force. It's two things that are actually like pushing and pulling. So it's like this dynamic relationship. Now, I don't know if it's just because I've experienced this a lot that makes it really easy to experience, or if that's really easy for other people to access. Do I have any advice for panic attacks? Yes, I do. So one thing I want to say is you can deconstruct panic attacks. If you think that you cannot, then you just don't have experience deconstructing panic attacks. It's 100% possible, and we're going to talk about a number of strategies to get there. Some of these have been studied, and they work really well through studies. Some of these have not been studied, and so, this is a personal experience, anecdote, etc. One piece of the pie is what's called box breathing. So you're going to try, this is how to slow down the nervous system, trigger the parasympathetic nervous system. Breathe in for 7 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 7 seconds, hold that out breath for 4 seconds. Breathe in for 7, hold 4, out 7, hold 4. So it's 7, 4, 7, 4, 7, 4, 7, 4. If you do that, about 5 minutes later, you'll start to feel the whole system calming down. 20 minutes later, the liver will clear all of the stress hormones, and it will stop re-triggering, because that's the problem, is that because there's still stress hormones going, you'll sort of calm down, do something for a couple minutes, okay, this is good, and they'll still be like, wait a minute. So that's what I'd recommend. That's tip number one. There's like dozens of tips. Tip number two is that a lot of the techniques to work with panic attacks are about getting our focus away from the throat, chest, belly, sort of central core of the body, which tends to get really, So a lot of the techniques are like feel your feet on the ground, feel the sensations of your feet on the ground, clench your toes, really feel that, clench your toes, right? Put your hands way out here in the distance and, like feel your hands, really feel them, grab something in the texture and really feel the cold of something, right? It's getting away from this core. Look at the room around you. I don't know if anyone watched Better Call Saul, but they use in that video, in that show, they use a technique, which is actually a real technique, where the guy's having a panic attack and he's naming objects and naming their color.
White sign. Red pepper. Purple sweater. Brown wood. Black mat.
Again, you're finding some way to focus out, away from what you're experiencing. Another thing you can do is actually soak in and be like, what is it really, when you name the object, okay, it's a red cup, right? I have my cup, red cup, but what is it like to look at red? Like, what is the experience of that? What is it really like experientially to look at red as opposed to some other color? Because it is different to look at red than it is to look at some other color. So what is that experience? So you're just sort of focusing a little bit, next object, you sort of move around it like that. Other ways to do that are to physically sort of get the system doing something, physical, take a walk, do something that requires the body's motor function, anything that will be stimulating experientially that is not, again, about the thought pattern that's looping with the emotions that is creating a panic attack. Finally, I would say that talking to somebody else, again, is an external focus. Talking about what you're experiencing, but talking about what they're experiencing, like talking, what's going on. Hey, this is a challenging thing for me. Do you have experience with this? And really trying to focus on what's happening for them. These are all great techniques for working with panic attacks. I want you to try those, come back soon, and tell me what your experience was like. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell icon so these videos show up right in your feed.